Okay, subtracting integers using just numbers. So what we talked about with addition is that sometimes we have really big numbers and we don't want to have to draw pictures or write a number line because it's a lot of work for each problem when the numbers get really big. So we want to have some ways to solve problems like this where we're only using numbers. Subtracting integers is pretty simple if you understand how to add integers. And the method that we're going to use for subtracting integers is just to change our subtraction problems into addition problems. So the strategy we are using is to change subtraction into addition. To subtract an integer, add its opposite. Okay, so I'm going to highlight add, and then I'm going to highlight opposite. Those are the two important things. So let's see what that looks like. Here's a subtraction problem. And remember that when we are subtracting integers, we want to change this into an addition problem. So we are adding the opposite. Let's break this into two steps. First, we're going to change this to addition. So our new problem is going to be 3 plus. We're changing that subtraction into addition. The next thing we need to do is we need to use the opposite of the integer we were subtracting. So this was the original integer right here, positive 4. We need to add the opposite, and if you remember from the opposite numbers video, the opposite of positive 4 is negative 4. So our new problem is 3 plus negative 4. Now, if we remember from our videos about adding integers, this is adding integers with different signs. Because we have a positive number and a negative number. So let's look at what the steps were to add integers with different signs. So remember, the 3 steps we need to take when we are adding integers with different signs is first, we need to find the absolute value of each number. We need to subtract the smaller absolute value from the bigger absolute value. And then we need to use the sign of the integer with the bigger absolute value. So let's go through those steps. We have 3. We need to find the absolute value of 3, which is 3. And then the absolute value of negative 4, which is 4. The 3 is the smaller absolute value, and the 4 is the bigger absolute value. So we're going to move on to number 2. I'm subtracting 4 and 3, and I'm getting 1. So I know that my answer is going to have a 1 in it. I just have to decide whether that 1 is positive or negative. So to do this, I'm going to look at my original numbers. And I see that negative 4 had the bigger absolute value, so my answer also needs to be negative. And my answer is negative 1. This example says 3 minus 12. So first we need to change this into addition. So instead of subtraction, we're going to be adding. And then the next step to change this into an addition problem is we need to make sure we're adding the opposite. So we need to find the opposite of 12, which is negative 12. So here's my new problem. 3 plus negative 12. And now I see, just like last time, we are adding numbers with different signs. So we are going to follow the same 3 steps that we followed for the last example. Step 1, find the absolute value. So we've got 3 and we've got negative 12. Oops. The absolute value of 3 is 3. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. This is the smaller absolute value, and this is the bigger absolute value. So when I move on to step number 2 of adding integers, 12 is our bigger number, 3 is our smaller number, and when I subtract them, I get 9. I know that my answer is going to have a 9 in it. I have to figure out whether my answer is positive or negative. I remember that the bigger absolute value was 12. In my original problem here, 12 was negative. So my answer needs to be negative 9. This problem says negative 8 minus negative 13. So first thing I need to do is I need to change this to adding the opposite. I want to change the subtraction problem into an addition problem, and I do that by making it a problem where I add the opposite. So I'm changing subtraction to addition. And then I'm finding the opposite of this number. And the opposite of negative 13 is positive 13. So my updated problem is now an addition problem where I have negative 8 plus 13. It looks like I'm adding 2 integers that have different signs. So once again, I'm going to follow those 3 steps we've been using to add integers with different signs. First thing I need to do when I'm adding, I need to find the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 8 is 8. The absolute value of 13 is 13. 8 is the number with negative 8 is the number with the smaller absolute value, and 13 is the number with the bigger absolute value. So when we move on to the next step, we need to take the bigger number, 13, and the smaller absolute value, which is 8. I subtract that and I get 5. So I know my answer is going to have a 5 in it. I just have to decide whether it's going to be positive or negative. So I remember that 13 was my bigger absolute value. In the addition problem, 13 is positive. So my answer is also going to be positive, positive 5. Negative 12 minus 14. I want to change this subtraction problem to an addition problem, and to do that, I need to add the opposite. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this subtraction sign to addition, so negative 12 plus. Then I need to find the opposite of this number, which is 14. And the opposite of 14 is negative 14. So now the addition problem I have is negative 12 plus negative 14. And now I see that I am trying to add two integers with the same sign. And these are the two steps that I need to follow in order to add integers that have the same sign. So the first thing I need to do is add the absolute values. So the absolute value of negative 12 is 12. The absolute value of negative 14 is 14. If I add those absolute values together, I get 26. So I know that my answer is going to be 26, but I have to decide whether my answer is positive or negative. And to do that, I need to find the common sign. I look at my addition problem. The sign that both numbers have in common is the negative sign. So my answer is a negative 26 because my common sign was negative.